Now let's take a look at Photoshop in 3D. I'm going to start by switching to the 3D workspace. And I'm going to add some text to this document. The 3D features are only available if you have Photoshop Extended. Photoshop Standard does not offer 3D tools. In fact, even if you have Extended, you need to make sure you have 512 megs of VRAM or a video card with dedicated video RAM. My laptop shipped with 256 megabytes, and I upgraded it to 512 so I could use these features. Really, 1 gig is recommended, 1 gig of VRAM, separate from your computer's RAM. And you could check this under Photoshop Preferences Performance on the Mac and Edit Preferences Performance on Windows. Here you could see I have an accelerated video card, NVIDIA to be specific in this case, but if this area is grayed out, you will not have access to the 3D features. In Photoshop Standard, there's actually no 3D menu at all. Okay, let's jump in. I'm going to click once on my document and hit Caps Lock and type space. Try again, hit Caps Lock and type space. I'll do a Select All, Command A or Control A, and I'll use my scrubby sliders to make this text large. I love the font that ships with Photoshop called OCR-A. I just think it gives that modern or even kind of retro space feel. I moved the text by going anywhere outside of the highlighted area. If you're outside, you can move without switching to the Move tool. And I will sample a new color for this. I could go with white, or once I've hit the color rectangle, I can actually sample a yellow from the background image. I'll click OK. You'll notice there's a new icon on the options bar across the top of the screen to make this type 3D. Before I do, I'm going to use Option or Alt to track this a little tighter. Option or Alt left arrow tightens the tracking or space between letters. Option or Alt right arrow will loosen it. I'll click 3D once, and in earlier versions of Photoshop, this used to be called repose. Repose was the ancient art of metalworking, hammering an image through, really giving physical objects 3D depth. Repose is completely gone now, and you may notice there's a few 3D tools that are missing from your toolbar. If you were paying attention, you probably saw grayed out tools up here when you were on the Move tool. Logically, usability has been improved a lot by letting you use the Move tool to pick up and move your 3D objects. In fact, as I click on the object, here I get what's called the 3D widget. And with that 3D widget, the green will let me move on the Y-axis, Y being up and down. The red or pinkish color guide will move on the X-axis, X being left to right. And it's a little difficult to see, but this is a blue. Blue will move on the Z-axis. Z is what you think of as space. It's floating. It's coming more forward to you, rising up, or becoming more distant, getting smaller, being an object that's further away. Now, to rotate this, as you move over any area, these rich cursors where it says rotate around Y-axis tell you what it's going to do. So when I rotate this, here you could see the blue Z-axis. In fact, every one of these little guides tells you what it's going to do. This will move, this will rotate, and this will scale. Scale in X. If I come to the red one, move, rotate, and the blue is covering up the other one, so I might decide to move this out of the way a little bit, but just be very cautious that it says the right thing before you click and drag. Now over on the right, there's a new Properties panel to PhotoshopCS6, and right now I have the option for Mesh. In the Mesh, that's where I can make this deeper or make it thinner. as I dial the extrusion depth down, I can make a more subtle 3D character. And text along with paths are fully editable. If I want to come to the character panel, I could switch my font to, let's say, Myriad Web Pro. There we go. Fully editable. Back to OCR-A. In PhotoshopCS6, once you applied 3D to type, it had to rasterize it, meaning you couldn't change the text, you couldn't adjust the letter spacing or any of the attributes. Now you can. Now as I look at mesh properties for type, if you scroll down a little bit, depending on your resolution, you may not need to do that. Edit Source would actually open up an embedded or protected PSB. This is a smart object. Basically, your way to get back in and change the words. If I close, switch to the Move tool and close this document and save the changes, it updates the word and keeps all your 3D settings. I'll undo that with Command Z or Control Z. Up here you have a light source, and with this light source, when I click it, now I can drag to change the lighting effects 2 different directions. In fact, notice the shadow in the background? You may not see it that well depending on the angle, but watch right here as I move this, and you can see the shadow automatically being adjusted. In the Properties panel, you could simply turn the shadow off or on. And you could play with the softness. When I do softness, I often like to use just my up arrow key to just blur the edge a little bit more. And I could move the camera angle or the light to see that shadow a little bit better. All right, the next icon that you'll see on your screen is this camera view. This rotates your ground plane. So basically, if you were walking around a person as the camera operator, you could look at that person from the front, from the side, from the back, from the top or from the bottom if you had the proper rigging. But here, the camera view is just showing you all sides of your 3D object. And you'll notice the light source moves as I move that as well. The first time you bring up 3D, you may also have under your View menu, Show, and the 3D secondary view panel. This will come up in the upper left corner, and instead of dragging the camera angle, this has saved presets in it. So I could look at this from the left side of the letters, or I could look at it from the right side, or the top, or the bottom. Until you get really comfortable with 3D, I actually like to close this. It's essential once you really start digging into 3D. But until you're comfortable, just take some time to experiment with the Properties panel. I'm going to click back on the word space, so now I could see my 3D widget, and there's a little teeny light gray area in the middle. I'll zoom in so you could see it, and as I zoom in, the widget got smaller. A lot of people gave feedback to Adobe that said this widget can be difficult to grab. So if I hold down Shift and click and drag up, it moves a bit slow, but you can actually increase the size of your 3D widget, giving you a bigger target when you go to move or rotate or scale. And that is your introduction to 3D type. You could take some time to play with this. I will switch to the Hand tool and hit Command 0 or Control 0 to fit in window to see where I am. If I want to add depth, I will go back to the Move tool and adjust the extrusion depth. I'll come back to the Hand tool. It's an excellent way to preview what you've done. The very last step with 3D is rendering. Rendering basically commits to your final object, the shadow, the lighting, the textures. So this is also known as ray tracing, and here you will see a final rendered result after it passes through. I'm not going to let that run all the way through. You could try this on your own machine, but take some time to tour the 3D settings with type and see what you can come up with.